Gentlemen, welcome to the greatest games on the Blizzard. My name is Marcus Speller. With me is Jonathan Wilson, and with us is Cecilia Lagos, a freelance European football correspondent based in the Netherlands, football writer and content producer for the Tactical Room and Sfera Sports in Spain, and of course her own YouTube channel, Sportiva. She's also collaborated with FIFA, ESPN, BBC, and many, many more. Ceci, pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm delighted having me.
We're delighted as well, especially with the choice of game. We go back to the first round of the 1962 World Cup finals. Chile 2, Italy 0. Why have you chosen this game?
Well, it's labeled as the most violent game in the history of football. That's quite a lot to say. In my personal experience, if I had to think about the fact that I've grown up watching Copa Libertadores, and an example, no, and when you watch Copa Libertadores, you watch lots of violence, or the South American qualifiers. So I didn't think that I would see something more violent than that. And then, it was quite a mayhem. I don't know if it was more violent than what I have seen before in those tournaments, but indeed, it has to be one of the most violent games in the history of football, by far.
Yeah. And you like that sort of thing, do you, Ceci? Is that what it feels to you?
You know what? It makes me laugh. I know it's not politically correct, and as journalists, we have to promote fair play and everything. But every time it is like, I can help it. It makes me laugh.
Yeah.
It's so cultural.
Oh, it's an enormous spectacle when it all kicks off like that. I mean, Jonathan nicknamed the sort of the Battle of Santiago. Anybody who knows anything about football history will be aware of this fixture.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a game that I knew about way, way, way before I'd seen it, before I had any sort of notion of what happened in the game. And I think from a British point of view, one of the reasons we know about it is David Coleman's famous introduction, which I might as well read out now, because we're going to do it.
Please do.
The game you're about to see is the most stupid, appalling, disgusting, and disgraceful exhibition of football possibly in the history of the game. Chile versus Italy. This is the first time the two countries have met, and we hope it shall be the last. The national motto of Chile reads, "By reason or by force." Today, the Chileans were prepared to be reasonable. The Italians only used force. And the result was a disaster for the World Cup. Now, if the World Cup is going to survive in its present form, something's got to be done about teams who play like this. And the amazing thing about this is that because this is before satellite link-ups and things, he's recorded this outside the stadium in Santiago, and the tape has then been shipped, well, on a plane, obviously, but flown back to London. So this is only broadcast 2 days later. So can you imagine if you've heard on the radio or something, the stories about what happens in the game, can you imagine the tension and the excitement as you're waiting to see the footage of this?
I mean, Ceci, what do you think when you hear the game? Because you grew up in Chile, I'm right saying.
Yes.
And when you hear that, what do you think? Do you think it's sort of a bit of British pomp and arrogance or something, or do you think no, fair enough?
And to be honest, I only knew of those words because of the investigation, of the research that I had to do when I wrote the article about exactly this game, the Battle of Santiago, for the Squall magazine. Issue number 2. It was devoted to battles. And of course, I didn't know about the views and the opinions of English journalists who were in Santiago at that time. So I found it epic. It was like, this is the first time that both teams play against each other, and I hope it's the last one. You had to laugh about it. I mean, oh my God, what did this guy see? No. But I grew up in Chile, and what I remember the most, or if you ask any Chilean about that game, probably everyone will tell you that game is about the punch of Lionel Sanchez against Mario David. That's the most famous in Chile, the most famous scene, the most famous take of the game, because of course, yeah, in YouTube you have like there are 2 videos with the whole game, but it's not easy to just grow up in the 80s and have access to that. So you only have that fragment, and you see during your whole life, Lionel Sanchez punching Mario David, and that was kind of it. But then there's a whole story and branches to the main story that make it so interesting, definitely historic.
Well, yeah, I mean, as you say, the backstory is fascinating. So going into, into the 50s, we hadn't had the World Cup for a few years, of course, because of the Second World War. And interesting, I didn't realize that, I should have realized this, that in 1938, Latin American sides and North American sides had boycotted the World Cup then, because they felt Europe was kind of dominating the landscape a bit much. And then we have the 1954 and the 58 World Cups, which were hosted in Europe. And the 62 World Cup, as I understand it, Chile, Argentina and West Germany were planning to bid to be host nation. And FIFA asked West Germany to withdraw from the process because South Americans were getting a bit fed up with Europe dominating. So already there's a little bit of tension between Europe and South America. And of course, Chile quite handsomely won the vote against Argentina. So Chile have been given the right to host the 62 World Cup. But
so it's worth pointing out why Argentina lost.
Yes, please do.
Well, so Argentina, there was the boycott in 38. They only sent an amateur side in 34 because of Argentinian football politics as the league went professional, which has got nothing to do with FIFA. But then they didn't send a team in 50 or 54 because of Peron and isolationism. So Peron's toppled. They send a team in 58. This decision's made in 56. So Argentina hasn't had a proper team at the World Cup since 1930. So I think that's why there was a sense of, well, hang on, you can't just suddenly swan in and say you deserve this. So I think that's why Chile, even though its football infrastructure was significantly less than Argentina's, I think that's why Chile wins the vote.
Well, and also the head of the FA, Carlos Ditborn, was quite the charismatic chap, Ceci. He was influential in Chile getting the bid as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, in the world of football, at the moment where Chilean football was trying to establish some international name, of course, and this was the opportunity. This was the opportunity, and he, of course, he spoke very good English, and he was very well acquainted. So naturally, I mean, he saw the chance, and definitely, as Jonathan said, of course, we didn't have the infrastructure, but he thought if we had the smallest of chances, we're going to grab it, and finally he did it, and he assembled quite a capable committee to organize it, and then everything that happened afterwards was just tragic. It was tragedy after tragedy.
Well, you're referencing the 1960 earthquake, which was the biggest earthquake ever recorded in the world at the time.
Exactly. But not only that, then afterwards, one of the members of the organizing committee, he died. He was run over while he was trying to change the tire on the way, and he died in the middle of the preparations. And then Ditborn himself died right a month before the start of the World Cup. So it was like super tough. And definitely that earthquake devastated the whole country. It was devastation all over. So of course that threatened the organization, and Ditborn actually was quite conscious about it, and he said, you know what, we should return the money for the organization of the World Cup and give it back to rebuild the country. And then Jorge Alessandri, then president of nation, he said, you know what, people need joy. People need football to have joy, because I mean, I've been through 2 quite big earthquakes, and I know perfectly what happens afterwards. It's they've been lower in the scale than that one, naturally, but not too much lower, and I know what happens. So definitely people need some hope, people need some joy, people need some something that makes them feel strong and in the sense of union too. You need to unite people around something. And of course, Alessandri saw that, and you know what? Keep the money and just make the best World Cup you can do in these circumstances.
I mean, Jonathan, it's amazing that it went ahead there. As Ceci says, 4 of the 8 tournament venues were ruined by this earthquake. And I mean, let alone all the sort of the thousands of people dying and so on. But it did go ahead, and that the tournament going ahead, they were seen as a huge revival of the nation almost, and bolstering kind of national pride.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at a map of the 4 venues, you've got Arica way up in the north, Santiago, then Viña del Mar and Rancagua, which are within an hour of Santiago.
Yeah.
So the Copa America in 2015, the game was in Viña del Mar and Santiago and in Rancagua. Now I went to Rancagua partly because I knew it had hosted the games in '62, and I was sort of slightly puzzled as to what it was like and why. And it's a tiny place. It really doesn't feel like a major city. And in 2015, it was actually one of the things I think you don't get at World Cups and Euros anymore. But one of the things that tournaments can do that I think Rancagua only hosted 2 games. Now, I remember arriving off the train and stepping off the train at the station, and immediately volunteers coming to kind of show me how to get to the stadium, to carry my bag, to basically do whatever I wanted.
You're very popular in Chile. I don't think you realise this.
Well, they were doing it for Miguel as well. So,
well, a friend of Jonathan's.
So the warmth, the friendliness, the sense of excitement that their town or their city was hosting an event of this magnitude. And then the thing I found really, really touching was when you got to the stadium, there was a load of Down syndrome kids who were dressed as chefs, handing out biscuits that they'd made. So that sense of the town pulling together and this being a major event in the history of the town. And this is the Copa America. So the World Cup in '62 must have been a million times bigger than that. And they had Argentina staying there. That was where they were based. So
there's a detail about it. Why I think Rancagua was chosen, despite the fact that it's indeed not exactly a big city or what you could call like a host city, but because there you have a mining camp, and it belongs to the biggest or the only national copper company. So the copper mining company wanted Rancagua and their camp to be involved in this. So I think that's why they chose Rancagua, but also because there were going to be 9 host cities, and basically half of them were totally wiped out. So they had to improvise, and there were only 5 or 4 in the end.
So you put all this together, ladies and gentlemen. You've got a country who was sort of on its knees after that earthquake, a country which isn't sort of flush with cash in the first place anyway, but a country that's suddenly got its national pride back, looking forward to this incredible tournament. And then it starts to, how would I say? They take a few digs from some foreign journalists. But do you know what we're going to do? We're going to have a quick break because we need a bit of room for that as well. And after the break, we'll talk about that in the game itself. So see you in a moment. Welcome back to the greatest games on the Blizzard. So yes, Chile bursting with pride. It's going to host the World Cup. It's happening against all the odds. They've overcome a lot of the country. And Chile start the World Cup very well. Now, Ceci, when did those 2 Italian journalists write and say what they did? Was it before the first game, or was it before the game against Italy?
I think it was before the game before Italy.
Right. Okay.
It was during the build-up, and I think they had already stayed like 2 weeks before, or they were there. Since the very beginning, or even I think it was they were staying 2 weeks before the start of the World Cup. So they had already spent a lot of time in Santiago, and Santiago is not what it is today.
Sure.
So, and the contrast for them between Europe and Italy, or whatever they have known before, and Santiago, of course, it was super shocking. And the legend says that they had at least one night out that had gone wrong, and then they were a bit fed up with it. It's like, you know what, this country really doesn't work. You have to find nothing that works. They got mugged or something, or maybe some women, you know, at the time robbed them or something. And the thing is that they wanted to take some kind of revenge with what they, because what they wrote, if you compare it, it's quite in the same sour tone. It's quite sour if you compare it. I mean, it's both of them are really disgusted, basically. And then they didn't hide it. So they were really tough, offensive, tone deaf. I mean, at the same time, I have to be honest, I don't think they were lying. Indeed, Santiago was probably all the things they said. The thing is that how they said it, the timing, was it necessary really? And the country was recovering from the major earthquake in history, you know. So they shouldn't have done it. That's the truth. And the problem is that there are always Chileans everywhere, and some Chileans in Italy saw what they wrote. No, and I have, if you, I don't know if Jonathan has the quotes. I have them.
Yeah, I've got some of them here.
Yeah,
so
if you can read it, because it's really, I mean, today you hear it and it's racist, it's offensive, it's...
Yeah, I mean, but the thing that struck me, you're reading them or hearing them, the thing that struck me was a lot of it is the kind of thing that, to be honest, I've been away at tournaments, you're away for 2 or 3 weeks, your phone stops working, or your hotel, I don't know, it's noisy, so you can't get to sleep, or your Wi-Fi doesn't work, or whatever. You get frustrated. It's the kind of thing you might say to your mate in the bar at midnight when you're tired. You don't write it and file it, and you don't actually mean it, and you certainly wouldn't file it in the context of being 2 years after one of the worst natural disasters in history. So the 2 journalists, Antonio Girelli from Corriere dello Sport, who's actually a really major figure. The main Italian football literary award is named after him. Yes, I have won it. Yes, and the other one, Corrado Pizzinelli from La Nazione. Yeah. So this is a selection of what they said. The phones don't work. Taxis are the phones don't work. Taxis are rare as faithful husbands. A cable to Europe costs an arm and a leg, and a letter takes 5 days to turn up. So you can see exactly, this is people who are just really frustrated because they can't do their job as efficiently as they'd like. But then it gets worse. Malnutrition, illiteracy, alcoholism, and poverty. Chile is a small, proud, and poor country. It has agreed to organise this World Cup in the same way as Mussolini agreed to send our Air Force to bomb London. They didn't arrive. The capital city has 700 hotel beds, and entire neighbourhoods are given over to open prostitution. This country and its people are profoundly miserable and backwards.
Shots fired.
I mean, it's not surprising that Chileans are upset by that. I mean, anybody would be upset by that.
Well, you see, I find it incredible. I didn't know this until looking into the game, actually, that this is really what kind of set it all off. And not only that, had massive sort of reverberations between European and South American sides for years to come. And really, if these 2 journalists hadn't have said this, I wonder if this game would have been that spicy at all. And some of the ill feeling that Europeans and South American, more associations and so on, had towards each other and filtered down, would that have been as intense, Ceci? I mean, it's a real kind of sort of sliding doors moment, you could argue, for world football.
Yeah, no, because especially what struck Chileans and the Chilean players the most, what they felt was an insult and aggravation towards Chilean women. Because Corrado Pizzinelli said that, an example, the prostitution, wait a minute, I had it, I just got it, but prostitution is exercised, in broad daylight, everywhere in Santiago or something like that. And no, whole neighborhoods practice prostitution in the open air. And besides that, there's there are the racist remarks. So, but what the Chilean players and Chilean people in general remember most, the ones who were witnesses to what happened, is the fact that they felt that they were insulting Chilean women, calling them basically prostitutes. So they felt that even though Leonel Sanchez says that they felt, even though they knew that the Italian players weren't to blame, they needed to do something about it, and they needed to retaliate. And the only way to retaliate was on the pitch. So it was building up. I mean, you could feel it according to the testimonies, according to what people that was there and people who lived the whole story, they said it was building up until the very moment of the beginning of the match.
Well, an Argentinian,
it blew up. It blew up.
Well, an Argentinian journalist was mistaken for one of the Italian reporters and was beaten up in a bar. I mean, that shows you how much this story had kind of been heard, and what their words had been heard by so many people in Chile.
But I think it's an interesting point.
Situation.
I think it's an interesting point, Marcus, about whether the tensions you see between European and South American federations, which, I mean, 66, we know how bad that became there. Would they have happened anyway? I suspect they probably would have done. I think there's a lot of tension there. And partly there's a power struggle of where the World Cup should be held. Should it be in Europe? Should it be in South America? You'd had the boycott. You then had the threatened boycott. I think referees were perceived to interpret the laws quite differently in Europe to South America. Certainly by 66, that's a huge issue. That one of the biggest problems with the quarterfinals is that Uruguay v West Germany has an English referee, England v Argentina has a West German referee, and so there's the surface level. Oh, hang on, the West German will favour England, the Englishman will favour West Germany. That's just a deal you can do. But also, you put European referees in charge of those games, the South American side's at a disadvantage because their games are refereed differently. They understand the laws in a different way. So the sort of universality of the laws that we're constantly trying to work towar's today, which is still not there.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah. So you get away with that in the Premier League. You hear that now.
Yeah, but back then they're miles apart. Because apart from anything else, not every game, or very, very few games are televised. You've got nothing to compare it to. So I think even different referees within the English league would interpret the laws differently. And it's very hard to correct that because you've got nothing to show the referees to say, well, that's how you should be doing it. So I think there's a whole number of reasons for that tension, but this is the touch paper that ignites it here. Yeah. And of course, the other underlying thing here is the comparative wealth of the European federations and European leagues. So the two Italian players who really get grief are Umberto Maschio and Jose Altafini, who are respectively Argentinian and Brazilian, but playing for Italy. So they're seen as somehow deserted their continent. So Maschio, who I spoke to when I was doing Angels of Dirty Face, I had a long interview with him. And he was saying, they kept on saying to me, you should be in Rancagua. What are you doing, traitor?
Really?
Yeah, traitor. They were calling them traitors all the time. Yeah, they were four actually, 2 Brazilians and 2 Argentinians, and they really had a hard time because people from the stands were insulting them because they were considered traitors, and on the pitch, Chilean players or South American players or whoever played against them who was from South America, they were going to be insulted by them. So because of that. And actually about the referees, because it makes sense to me now that Jonathan mentions it, like the rivalry between Europe and South America at that time. Now it's not such, but there was a Spanish referee appointed for that game, and the Italians thinking that because the Spanish spoke Spanish, he was going to favor the Chileans. So they rather had another referee, and they had, just imagine a team complaining about a referee and having changed, having replaced. So they had finally Ken Aston, who wasn't who didn't know what he was signing for, basically.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
poor old-
Well,
poor old
we
Ken.
should talk about Ken Aston. I mean, he was a very senior English referee,
Yeah.
and he did Chile's first game in the tournament. So they beat
Yeah.
Switzerland 3-1. He does that game, and for some reason, which I can't fathom, doesn't send off Rojas, which he clearly should. He should send off Rojas and Eschmann, so one from each side, and he doesn't. And I guess that to Chileans, they sort of think, well, actually, this guy's okay. We can win with this guy, and he doesn't send our players off. So yeah, we'll go with that. Yeah, that's fine. But poor Ken Aston sort of managed to be at the centre of a whole series of controversies. Had nothing to do with him through the 60s. But I think this was, I mean, he himself said this was by far the hardest game he ever had to try to referee.
Yeah. I mean, Ceci, before the game, obviously, you know, as we say, it's huge. I mean, we should say, but by the time this game came around, I think the two Italian journalists had fled the country, probably fearing for their lives. So they were out of it. Was there an attempt by the Italian players before the game to try and have to try and bring a bit of peace? I read somewhere that some of the players were handing out bouquets of flowers to the spectators and they had them chucked back in their face. Is that true? Was that a story?
It is actually.
Right.
If you go to YouTube, and there are two, as I said before, there are two videos that show the complete match, and one of them it's edited, so they have cut it to the maximum possible, and the other one shows the whole thing. And that video shows the moment where the teams go onto the pitch, and you can see the Italians with the bouquets of flowers, and they were trying to hand them out to the public because we didn't have fences, we didn't have protections at the time. So
It's a fair gesture, I think.
Yeah. So they were trying to just, give flowers everywhere.
Yeah, no, not having it. Not having it.
And you can see the people like shouting like that, like this. You know what? This is not working now. We're going to war, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Oh dear. Yeah.
If you can watch it, it's funny to see it because then you read it first and then you see it, you watch it, and it's Jesus Christ, it is so true.
Yeah, I mean that shows you what was about to happen, if the crowd were that bad. So, I mean, the first foul of the match came after 12 seconds, straight from the off bang. It sets the tone, doesn't it? And I mean, within the first 5 minutes, poor old Ken Aston is sort of, I don't know, he's running around like a scoutmaster trying to organise the boys, isn't he? He's just, I've never seen a referee have such a hands-on approach, but I suppose he had to, Jonathan, because it was all kicking off.
Well, and he does have the advantage, or he did have the advantage of being a very big man.
Yeah.
I mean, however hard these players are, you're not going to mess with 6'4" Ken Aston, who, he looks like I don't know, like a wrestler or something. He's a big guy. So at least he had that. I mean, imagine if he'd been a little, if he'd been something like Rudy Kreitlein, who did the Argentina game in '66, being this little bald, fussy man. But at least he has the physical presence. And there are moments, certainly in the second half, where he's literally just pulling players apart. And he's got the size and strength to do that.
Paul Durkin would have struggled, is what you're saying.
So the first sign that it's really going off is 5 minutes in, when Rojas goes down under a challenge. But then there's a melee breaks out. Lionel Sanchez goes down in that melee. And Ken Aston must have been thinking then, oh, God, I'm going to have to send somebody off here. I've got to do something because this is already out of control. And so 8 minutes in, we get the first sending off. And actually, he gets it wrong.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
So Farini, the Italian, Giorgio Farini, is he's picked up the ball in his own half. He's moving towards the centre circle. And Lander sort of just kicks him on the back of the calf, nowhere near the ball. He's a good.
It's outrageous.
60, I don't know, 2 feet, 3 feet from the ball. Yeah. That to me is a sending off offence.
Yeah.
Farini just turned around and smacks him.
Yeah.
And of course, Farini gets sent off for it. But he won't go. The police have to come on to take him off. I mean, a huge melee breaks out. Yeah. And in the melee, Maschio has his nose broken by Lionel Sanchez. Yeah,
one of the players goes down clutching his face. I couldn't quite.
That's Maschio.
That's Maschio.
That is Maschio. Okay, yeah, I was going to say that does make sense. I mean,
and the thing is, Maschio is a really, really hard man.
No, we're talking about footballers in the early '60s.
We talked about Maschio when he played for Racing in the game against Celtic.
In
'67. he was one of that Racing side. He was a tough.
Wait a minute. Yeah, he was very tough. I mean, he played throughout the whole game injured because he was also kicking the ankle at the time very heavily. So he was with his nose broken and his ankle almost. So it
no
was very,
substitutes,
yeah,
of course.
it was very complicated. But Muscu first, in the first pandemonium, because this started so early. I mean, it's incredible. It's not that tension built up. No, it was immediate. I mean, yeah, before the game, but it exploded immediately. So at the first pandemonium, because it's also amazing to see. I mean, it's unbelievable to see that it's not only the players surrounding and basically harassing the referee, but it's also, you see, I mean, a crowd of journalists, photographers, unthinkable nowadays, unthinkable. So in that first moment, because Aston was totally surrounded by people, by players, all complaining, and he couldn't see what was happening outside that cloud of people. It's like the cartoons, you know, it made a cartoon. Outside that, Muscu just came like nothing and punched Lionel Sanchez first, and he fell, and he had to have medical assistance. And then that's why he retaliates and you know, okay, this is it. This is my bill to you. This is my check. Take it, you know. And then he punches again Muscu and broke his nose. So it wasn't because of nothing. So there's a story there, but it's so nice in a way to read first the story and then to check it, to do the fact check while watching the video, because you can see all those things and also like correct all the imprecisions, because there are lots of imprecisions. We don't have we didn't have at the time, of course, the access of all the documents and all the records of everything. So there are lots of imprecisions, and then you can actually see like minute by minute what's happening, what's real, what's not, what's wrong, what's confused, and it's amazing. So that punch has a reason, you know. Muscu really got away with it because he should have been sent off. I mean, half the team should have been sent off, actually.
Ridiculous. I mean, most of the stuff you just said there happened before the halfway point in the first half.
Exactly.
Well, hang on, we're in the first 10 minutes still.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, if we were to kind of go into depth of every heavy challenge that should have been at least a yellow card, even in those days, we'd be here all day. So we have to sort of fast forward at some point. But that was the sort of major talking point in that part of the game.
Not a yellow card, because they haven't been invented yet.
Sorry, I should say. Well, of course, Ken Aston.
Ken Aston is the man who invents them. So
yeah, no wonder he did. He thought that was in case I get given one of those games again. So, I mean, if I may, but please stop me if I'm missing something. Let's go forward to that Lionel Sanchez moment where he was fouled by Mario David, the Italian, of course, and David was sort of hacking away at him a bit, and he retaliates with that punch to the face, as you say, right in front of the linesman.
And sorry, this linesman, let me just step in, because I only found this out yesterday. It is such an amazing story.
Yeah.
The linesman is Leo Goldstein. Leo Goldstein was a Polish Jew who went to Auschwitz, was literally in the queue going into the gas chambers at Birkenau, when he gets pulled out by an SS guard who's claims to be a former German international, and says, "I recognize you, you're a referee." And he's, yeah, okay. And they take him back to Auschwitz to referee games between the camp guards.
My goodness.
And that's how he survives the war. I mean, it's the most preposterous story. He takes joint US and Israeli citizenship. So, he's the linesman this happens in front of. A completely, a side character to the drama, but what an extraordinary story he has.
Exactly. That's why I said that this game has so many like ramifications and backstories, things that you could make pieces about totally apart from the game itself, because exactly I was going to tell that little detail. I mean, he saved his life because he was the only one in the camp who knew the laws of the game. So basically refereeing saved his life, literally.
Blimey. So and Leonel Sanchez, he was the son of a professional boxer as well. So kind of his father obviously taught him well. So much so, the BBC, I think it was the BBC commentator said when the moment happened, he said, well, that was one of the neatest left hooks I've ever seen. Now, apart from that being one of the most English sort of sentences of all time, you know, I suppose the commentator had been so desensitized by that point to what was happening on the field that, well, of course there's another punch, you know, and I've got to commentate on that now, haven't I? You know, that's
What's
extraordinary.
Crazy to think about is neither David nor Sanchez were sent off after that. They kept playing. And one of the biggest imprecisions is to say that Mario David got sent off at that moment. No, he got sent off like 5 or 10 minutes later, almost at the end of the first half. But then after that, I mean, it was crazy to see how Mario David was kicking. I mean, it was just insane. And then the response of Sanchez, and they just kept playing. So it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, if that happens today, Sanchez wouldn't get up. Because he's kicked twice when he's lying on the ground. He's sort of, because he's fouled, he sort of falls onto the ball, and then David sort of, as though trying to kick the ball out from under him, just sort of kicks him twice in the ribs. So these days he'd just stay down, it'd be a red card, and on we go. But I guess he'd lost all sort of faith that the justice would take its course. So up he gets, swings the left hook. And then somehow he gets away with it as well.
Well, kicking in the context of this game, a kick in the ribs actually is one of the more minor offences, isn't it? I mean, Mario David, he earns his red card. You know, he
many times over. He's worked hard for that.
I mean, it's one of the most infamous challenges, or it's not even a challenge. It is just assault. That's what it is. You can't call it a challenge at all. I mean, he responds with it with a fly kick to Sanchez's head, which of course he gets sent off for. And that to me is the clip, if you like, the video clip that you see of this game, because it is so outrageous. I mean, even in the context of the game, it's kind of like, what on earth are you playing at, man? You know. But he was sent off, and Italy were down to 9 men, and Chile, surprisingly, still had 11 on the field, of course. And they were, again, incredibly, the only 2 sendings off of the match. But it was 0-0 for most of the game. You know, it would take. We should say Sanchez got away with another punch, of course, later on the match. You've mentioned that. But we had to wait until the 73rd minute for Rodriguez to score the opening goal. I mean, one could forget that there was a game of football to be won there rather than just a fight, Ceci.
And actually, the Italians had the clearest chances until that moment, basically. And Chile, tried to create some chances, but the Italians, even with 10 men first and then with 9, they had clearer chances. And it was difficult. It was difficult. And of course, if you think that Chile survived that game with 11 men on the pitch, and of course, everyone else started complaining, and rumor, started spreading that FIFA had instructed the referees to be a little bit softer on Chile because of what had happened, and because also they hadn't sold all of the tickets. So there's some footage of stadiums half empty. So they needed Chile to go as far as they could in order to keep selling tickets. Otherwise, I mean, it was already challenging, and it was already quite a questioned World Cup. So without Chile, it was going to be a total failure, probably. And that's what they say. Of course, you always think that the locals had to be some kind favored, but I don't think that Aston was playing that game. I don't want to think about that, but definitely, I mean, how on earth Leonel Sanchez, I mean, he himself said, if Aston had sent me off, it was totally deserved. He knew it. He knew that he gotten away with it, totally.
Yeah, incredible. I mean, one of my favourite moments for the game, if you can call it that, Jonathan, is there's just an out and out rugby tackle, which again is one of the more minor offences from a Chilean player. And Ken Aston, in sort of trying to break them up, he sort of falls on the ground with them. And then this just it's such an odd thing that you just wouldn't see in modern football. The referee on the ground with the 2 players trying to separate them.
Yeah, that's Toro who commits the rugby tackle.
Yeah, right,
He goes on to score the second goal. So that's between the two goals. So the first goal is 73 minutes, a long free kick from Navarro. It's sort of Matrell sort of flaps it out, doesn't really get much on it, and then Ramirez, who's sort of noted for his heading, puts a sort of a very well directed sort of looping header back in. And then there's this rugby tackle, and then just a couple of minutes ago, Toro with a actually really nice goal, long range shot, 25 yards in the bottom corner, and the game is won 2-0.
Yeah, I mean, there were two nice moments of quality, as you say, from Ramirez, but particularly from Toro. You know, you don't. But
Toro probably shouldn't have been on the pitch for that, because that rugby tackle probably should be sending off.
Yeah, but again, you know, although Jonathan, I mean, as ridiculous as this sounds, you know, had he have got sent off for that,
he'd feel aggrieved in the context of the game.
Yeah. Yeah. So. Yeah, the game eventually ends 2-0, and as Ken Aston himself said, I wasn't reffing a football match; I was acting as an umpire in military manoeuvres, you know. But then then it all started to really sort of get a bit punchy in the press. You know, there was accusations that the Italians had been doping from one or two people in Chile, and then when word did reach Italy about what happened, the Italian army had to protect the Chilean embassy in Rome. So as we know with football matches, I mean, nowadays perhaps not as much as it used to be, Ceci, they have ramifications, don't they?
Absolutely. I mean, it was history made there also. I mean, because of that win, Chile could secure their going through the round of 16. I mean, no, it wasn't the round of 16. It was quarterfinals. So yeah, it was crazy. And Italy was on the verge of elimination. So, and the funny thing is that they were considered candidates to win the World Cup before. So it was such a disappointment for them, for their own country, and it was definitely. Well, and probably the biggest ramification of the game was the creation of the yellow and red cards by Aston, because he got definitely inspired by it, and also by some experience that he had in '66. So, okay, you know what? I'm not up to this anymore. Something has to be done. And then the story says that he was driving, you know, and he said, I mean, at a red light, he said, "Oh, wait a minute, red, yellow." Okay. And then he invented the yellow and red cards. But it's funny to think that game was the seed of a part of football as we know it today.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was crazy. I mean, the fact that we are talking about this game now, 60 years on, basically, it says everything.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, how is the game? Is it fondly remembered in Chile? I mean, do they sort of spin it as, oh, well, without this game, you know, we wouldn't have helped progress football with yellow and red cards? Or is it seen as a bit of embarrassment, or is it just a part of the history?
I know. You know what? It's a bit, because I think Piccinelli and Girelli, they were right when they said that Chile was a proud country. So yeah, everything that makes them feel more powerful, or that allows them to show their character, like we are survivors basically, because yeah, Chile is a land of earthquakes, Chile is a land of natural disasters, but mostly earthquake, and every time the whole country or half the country has to rebuild from zero every time. So and also there's this coming from the Mapuche people. They fought 300 years against the Spaniards until they kicked them out. So there's this thing of saying, you know, we Chileans, we can against everything. So even in football, in games or moments like that, if you can demonstrate that, you know, we are Chileans, you're not going to run us over or abuse us or whatever, it's good for people. So I think this game is remembered or talked about like as a display of this warrior spirit or something. But definitely, if you see it, it's like Jesus. It's embarrassing. I mean, I don't think many people will see it would say it openly, but yeah, it's not exactly the best sample of football dignity.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, for a number of years now, Jonathan, we see Chile as pretty handy side, even though they haven't. This was their best showing, of course, at a World Cup ever, semi-finals, but we've seen them in the knockouts in the World Cup and have produced teams that have been very effective. And of course, they did play Italy in the 1998 World Cup as well.
Well, and in '66.
But yes, of course, yeah.
There's David Coleman. So I hope we never play each other again. The very next World Cup, they play against each other. And where better to host it than Roker Park, Sunderland?
Exactly.
So
yeah.
We've now weirdly we've done Chile v Italy games twice.
Yeah,
they've played each other 3 times at World Cups. We've done 2 of them on this podcast now, and the one we haven't done is one my dad was at.
Ah, well, there you are. My goodness, I'm sure David Coleman thought it was like pulling on an old jumper when he sat down to watch that game. Oh dear, Ceci, it's been great talking to you about this game. Thank you very much for coming on the pod. It's been a pleasure.
I've had a wonderful time. Thank you so much for inviting me. Really, just time flies. I wish we could just, keep talking and talking. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Not at all. Well, for more stories like that, do check out theblizzard.co.uk. But from me and Jonathan and Ceci, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time for another great game. Ciao.